Negotiations between union members and their employer were at an impasse. The union denied what the company said, that the workers were flagrantly abusing their contract sick leave provisions. Well, one morning at the bargaining table, the company's chief negotiator held aloft a copy of the morning's newspaper. "This man called in sick," the fellow decreed, and there on the sports page was a photo of the supposedly ill employee who had just won the local golf tournament with a terrific score. Absolute silence in the room. Finally, a union negotiator broke the silence, saying, "Wow, just think what kind of score he could have had if he hadn't been sick." So, what kind of work ethic do you have? Do you embrace? Do we put in our time and just do enough? Do we take shortcuts on occasion? Or do we do a job well with pride and extra effort and attention? I think these are good questions to ask ourselves no matter what kind of work, volunteer, employed out of the home or within the home, this Labor Day weekend. In our church setting, our minds go right to basic teachings in Matthew chapter 5, verse 41, found in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus advises, "And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2." To put this in a historical perspective, many of you know that in Jesus' day, soldiers could require people to carry burdens for a distance. Now, this was just one example of Roman despotism. The custom was especially practiced during wars in Syria, Palestine, Persia, and Roman officers would require men to carry food and other military supplies for 1 mile. Now, lighter burdens might be given to the individual who had a willing, humble attitude. Jesus recognized resistance only increases one's burden. Meekness and gentleness were ultimately to bring happiness and peace, according to Aramaic scholar Rocco Errico. Jesus was teaching his followers that they could move past the bonds of that which was required if they did the task with a different attitude. Instead of seeing it as almost enslavement, they could complete the task with an attitude of non-resistance. For us, going the extra mile is something that we understand figuratively. And it simply means to put forth more of an effort than's to be expected. So we go the extra mile when we go above and beyond minimum requirements. We go the extra mile when we put out a greater effort to get a task done correctly or to please someone. And to underscore this, I want to emphasize that attitude does come into play for us here too. Because if you pick up your dictionary and you look at the definition, we're reminded that attitude is a settled feeling or thinking about someone or something, but it's reflected in our behavior often. So going the extra mile might not be heroic, it might not be epic, it's not always obvious or grand, but we do it as a kind, thoughtful gesture. We do it with respect and with a loving attitude. And it helps to craft our life. Think of Unity's third principle. We create our life experience through our way of thinking. British essayist and philosopher Thomas Carlyle wrote, "Every day that is born into the world is like a burst of music, and rings itself all day through, and thou shalt make of it a dance, a dirge, or a life march, as thou wilt. As we meet and exceed our personal goals and objectives, or the expectations of others, the quality of life that we live along the way is something we determine personally ourselves. Dance, dirge, or life march. Viktor Frankl's life in Auschwitz concentration camp proved this. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man or a woman but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Many years ago, an older woman was strolling through a Pittsburgh department store. Now, she was obviously just browsing, and she passed counter after counter without any clerk approaching her. All the salespeople had decided that she really didn't have any intention of buying, and so they made it a point to be otherwise engaged when she would stop at their counter. Finally, the lady came to a counter that was staffed by a young clerk who politely asked her if he could help her. "No," she replied, "really, I'm just spending time waiting for the rain to stop so I can go home." "Very well, ma'am," he said with a smile, "but can I bring you a chair to have a seat?" And he brought it for her without even waiting for an answer. After the rain let up, the young man offered the senior his arm, and he escorted her to the door of the store. As she left, she asked him for his card. Several months later, the owner of the store received a letter asking that young sales clerk be sent to Scotland to take an order for some home furnishings. The owner of the store wrote back and said that he was sorry, but this young man did not even work in the home furnishing department, but he sure would be happy to send an experienced person, in quotes, to do the job. Back came the reply that no one would do but that particular young man. And the letter was signed by Andrew Carnegie. The house he wanted to furnish was Skibo Castle in Scotland. The senior woman, his mother, Margaret Carnegie. Well, the young man did make the trip to Scotland, and he returned with an order for several $100,000 worth of furnishings, and also a partnership now in the store holdings because of that order. The order in today's dollars would be with millions. What created this wonderful opportunity? Well, genuine friendliness, common courtesy, and a little kindness. And this is the story that Napoleon Hill reports in his book, The Master Key of Riches, directly from an interview with Andrew Carnegie himself. Our attitude is so important in life. It impacts so much. Behavior, relationships, mental health, success. It influences our behavior. It affects our relationships. It impacts mental health, and it determines our success. Our attitude molds and shapes our life. Now, its influence can be subtle, but it also can be dramatic. In big and in little ways, we see its efforts. It shows up immediately, and it shows up down the way suddenly as life goes on. Our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, wrote this affirmation at age 94. "I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm and spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by me." We can just imagine the extra miles that he went sizzling with zeal and enthusiasm, and at age 94, springing forth, using that mighty faith. Some of you know he used to transmit over radio in the wee hours of the night from the tower there at the village, far-reaching at that hour that he seeded ministries and study groups in Africa. My goodness, going the extra mile indeed, and with a positive attitude. Years ago, coming home from a camping trip out west with friend Cindy, we stopped for a comfort break in the middle of Wyoming at a rest stop, and it was smack dab in the middle of the heat of the afternoon. But the rest stop was a concrete structure, so it was shaded and cool inside. On my way out of the facility, I paused because there were some paper towels on the floor, so I just stopped and started putting them in, no big deal. And in walked a couple of women. One had made her way over to the stalls, and she said, "Oh, ma'am, can you tell me, could you get me some more tissue?" So, sure, and I had seen there's a little wraparound poured concrete storage area, so I went over and got it. And then her friend asked for some more paper towels, so I carried over paper towels. And on the way out, I just kind of laughed, and I explained I really wasn't an attendant, but I was just doing my part and wished him to have a good day. Well, that fall, I was teaching 5th grade. And I used my story about the paper trash in the restroom when we were discussing the 3 R's of the environment: reduce, reuse, recycle, you know it. The kids suddenly get sidetracked on this whole lesson because you can imagine what they were thinking. Their teacher is the restroom attendant. You know, that like the best thing in the world. Okay, but how interesting. From that point on, word spread, because the other 5th grade too then, we had kids self-reporting in the morning and at lunch about picking up trash, or they come back a little bit late from the restroom because they were picking up trash. Now, I know I taught fractions, parts of speech, creative writing. I taught poetry. I taught famous painters, the life cycle of plants, on and on and on, that whole 5th grade curriculum. But you know what the kids learned that year, right? The good news was, it was going the extra mile with a smile on their face, from a simple anecdote in a science lesson. As we consider some of these ideas today, we all realize that we can improve our area of attitude, and then life changes. And it just depends how much time and effort we want to put into it, or how much interest we have in making the change. So how can we do it? We can practice gratitude. Studies show that our sleep improves, that our mood improves, and that even chronic pain is reduced. So whether you choose to record your gratefuls, as daughter Zemi called them when she was 4, or you decide just to go to bed and list 3 each evening, consider beginning. And then something that came up in 9 o'clock class this morning, minding our self-talk. We talked about forgiving ourselves, but the self-talk builds up. So we want to monitor the tone that we use and the words that we use. We can replace negative thoughts with positive statements, and best to have one at the ready, because that comes up more often to the day than what we realize. So a go-to personal affirmation, maybe, I am a child of God, or I am getting better every day. I am likable. I am light, life, power. Whatever works for you, tuck it in your pocket. Maybe identify a positive influence. Who do we know that has an optimistic attitude, that exudes positive energy? Can we spend more time with them? Or can we emulate how they live their life as we are ourselves in our own life? And then be mindful that there are points in life we might want to actually ask for help. Maybe talking to a friend might get us through a rough emotional or mental time, or maybe actually seeking professional help might be appropriate. But what is appropriate, no matter where we are, is getting out of a stuck place in mind. We have so many examples of going the extra mile with a wonderful attitude sitting right here today. The person that greets each individual that walks into the room by name. We have individuals who, over the years, sent out cards to acknowledge birthdays, express thank yous, acknowledge special occasions. And I see at least 4 of you sitting here today that are either doing it now or have done it. What about the individuals that greet us warmly at either door when we enter on a Sunday morning? The folks that give warmly to that holiday project each winter to allow members in our community less fortunate the extra pair of socks or the long underwear or the sweatshirt. And then I know hands would go up if I said, raise your hand if you monthly participate in the SOS group that feed others in our community. And more recently, we've had a rush of volunteers that support our office manager as we continue to tweak her working remotely. And there's so many more that we've now added that slide toward the end of our service so that we can thank someone and let folks know about a job well done that may even be out of sight, maybe we never knew about. There's a piece by Jesse B. Rittenhouse, literary critic and poet, that applies to these considerations today. It goes, I walked a mile along life's way with someone I knew the other day. The path was dreary, rough and steep, thorns by the way, crevices deep. For I walked with him against my will and grudged the time I could spare so ill. For I had places to go, other things to do. I had books to read, a garden to weed, 1,000 things which cried of need. It was busy, hurried too. Then I went another mile, for he, I somehow felt, had need of me. And the path grew smoother, less steep the hill, for now I walked of my own free will. Thank God I walked that second mile, for I learned to love my friend the while. When we put more of an effort than is expected, when we go beyond and past minimum requirements and do all this with the graciousness of the heart that Jack Kornfield talks about, life becomes richer and more rewarding. And surprisingly, over time, we develop patience. We become more optimistic. We use our talents, and we develop new ones. All this is our choice. Is this the life that we want to lead? Some final words of wisdom from Theodore Geisel, aka Dr. Seuss. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. With a smile, with generosity of spirit, let's all go the extra mile. Amen. Let's have some time of meditation. And so find that quiet place, the place where all falls off. And we are at the point of spirit. In this quiet place, from a consciousness of integrity, I take part in growth, my own growth. I put my whole heart into all that I do. I put my whole heart into all that I do. I try new things. I stretch myself. I step out into life with a vision of good unfolding. In doing so, I invest deeply in life, in my own living, in the life of others, in the natural world, all through my positive attitude and my intention. And I trust in the goodness of God to allow this to unfold. I say yes when appropriate. Yes. I follow my heart. I accept the promptings of spirit. I put my whole heart into everything I do. In the silence, the silence. Silence. In this place of communion, from a point of harmony, I express compassion. I'm calm and act as a soothing presence. I am loving to myself, and I am loving to others. I use my talents to serve and to support, to reach out, I go further than expected with renewed energy and calm. I feel fulfillment and spiritually satisfied. I put my whole heart into everything I do. I bless my world, and in doing so, I am blessed in return. I become aware now of individuals in this room, of the circulation of the cool air, and my rhythmic breathing. I come back to this time and this place, saying Amen and Amen. And it is so.